would up until that point in time. What do you think?
I still think the odds are heavily in his favor because he's got so many of the owners in his corner. And as you mentioned, at the end of the day, his job is to make owners money, and he's done that spectacularly over the years. And that's why they remain in his corner, and they want to fall on their sword for him at all possible. So I still think the most likely scenarios they're playing keep away, so to speak, in the fact that basically the NFL commissioner's in hiding right now despite all these issues. And I think the hope from the NFL standpoint, and I use that word understanding it's them, not me, the hope is that the national media eventually moves on to the next thing, and we all understand something will happen, and they will move on. The NFL media will always be here, but that's not nearly as high profile. And the hope of ownership and the hope of Roger Goodell is the fact that, after a little bit of time, people will forget and they'll just be able to move on status quo. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. I think it's a very short-term way of thinking by the ownership, because when the next incident happens, and this is my point, and it doesn't matter when it happens, it could be a month from now, it could be a year from now, we all know something's going to happen, and the old questions are going to be raised at that point, and the fact that, as I stated, Roger Goodell just doesn't have any credibility to handle these matters anymore, and that's not changing because his history is his history, and he can't change it at this point.
Absolutely. I was joking. I said, boy, the NFL sure wishes LeBron James was a free agent right about now, man. That would surely be something, because like you mentioned, to get the media's attention off of it, and the next most popular thing is usually something that involves James or, hey, Manziel played this week. Maybe maybe we can trot that one out there, man. But no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that's where going with the outside. I even thought, man, the outside arbitrator, that's a good way to go with this thing until you see all the tentacles that connect everybody together, and then you go, well, you really didn't pick the best person because this whole thing was in the bag to begin with here. So way to try to start doing some damage control, because you still left yourself open. But I think that even ties into what you just said about not having any equity to work with.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned about the ex-FBI director who's worked for a law firm that has had dealings with the NFL. So
right.
As you mentioned, tentacles and obviously, people around the league know Robert, the most independent guy in the world. There's that appearance of impropriety, and sometimes that's greater than the impropriety itself. I personally think he'll do an above-board job. But, the fact that, and this is what, I don't think enough people have put this together. Think about what the NFL is asking you to believe. And they're asking you to believe that they didn't have access to the Ray Rice tape and they couldn't get access to the Ray Rice tape. Yet, when the AP report came out, it took them less than 8 hours to get the ex-head of the FBI to lead the investigation.
Right.
The one of the highest profile law enforcement officials in this country under two different presidents in two different political parties. There's not a bigger name they could have gotten, and they got it done within 8 hours. But they can't get a tape from the Revel Casino in Atlantic City. That's what they're asking you to believe. It was at its core, and by the way, I'm a person who believes Roger Goodell never saw this tape. I do not believe he saw this tape. He's too smart. It was willful on his part. He didn't want to see it, and he didn't see it. But to claim that the league didn't have the wherewithal to get it is just ridiculous.
And, there is still, and obviously, that story. I noticed, too, how the details of that AP story got blurred because the tape was sent to one of the satellite offices, right? Not to the actual main NFL office, because they've got the smaller offices around the country as well. So I saw that part kind of got blurred over in the story there, because they, of course, it sounds like we sent it to Roger Goodell's front door and somebody saw it. I agree with you there, because you have to keep that layer of deniability between you and the deal, But I do believe, obviously, somebody did see it somewhere, because they do have the voicemail acknowledging that it was watched by a secretary or somebody out there.
Yeah, and no, I mean, the guy who broke the story was Rob Motti from the Associated Press, and he's from Philadelphia. He's here, and I know him, and he's been very above board. All he reported was the fact that someone from the NFL received the tape.
Yeah.
He has no idea who it was. He heard the voicemail that from a woman at the NFL indicating that she received the tape. And he's been very above board that he has no idea what happened to it from that point forward, whether it was, put under her desk, given to someone else, just that someone in the NFL received it and saw it. But, again, anyone who knows anything about the NFL security apparatus, it's heavily fortified with ex-FBI people. The head of NFL security is the ex-Pennsylvania State Police chief, the guy who was in charge of the entire Pennsylvania State Police under then Governor Ed Rendell. He's very well versed on New Jersey and the practices of getting evidence from New Jersey, and certainly would have had the muscle to get anything he wanted, whether it be from the Rebel, other avenues. It just defies, credibility at every standpoint, and that's the biggest issue with Roger Goodell. It's credibility, and it's hubris, and it's a failure to admit. It's just simple. I don't believe there was a scandal here. I don't know if people understand that. I don't believe there was a conspiracy. I believe that Roger Goodell looked at Ray Rice, looked at his wife, looked at his reputation with the Ravens, took into account what he meant to that franchise, and believed he deserved a second chance. That's it. There's no conspiracy. That was his thought process. Then when the uproar from the general public came, people call his famous mea culpa and saying he got it wrong. It wasn't really an admission. It was an admission of, oh, that's what it was. And if at that point he would have came out and said what I just said, I think Ray Rice deserved a second chance. I made a mistake. Please forgive me. I think this would have been over. But he doesn't have, whatever you want to call it, the humility, the ability to do anything like that. And then one lie begets another, and we all know how that works. And that's why he's in the situation he's in.
And you know what? That's a good way to sum it up, because a lot of the off-the-air conversations I've had with people say, man, they, for whatever you think they did, whatever level of culpability you give them before this thing blew up, that's where they really just, if you want to use a football term, fumbled the ball left and right. Talk about fumbling twice on one play we saw over the weekend. That's what the NFL did here in their public relations attempt to cover things up or to give the appearance of smoother results than perhaps, because they knew how things are going to play, and they really just kept tripping one foot over the other as they got deeper into this thing.
Yeah, and in every aspect of life, and it's good theater and all that fact. But you have to think, what did the NFL have to gain by suspending Ray Rice for 2 games? There was no conspiracy. It was just they misread the public's upset at what this was going to be. That's it. and refusing to cop to it, and then, as I said, show just a modicum of humility and saying, all right, I thought this way, but obviously no one agrees with me. He's tried to go in a different direction, and whether he's getting bad advice or he's just we are where we are. And as I said, I don't Roger Goodell ever to handle these matters in the future. And to me, that's the bigger problem. Everything that's happened has happened. You have to deal with it. And the guy who is, supposed to deal with it can't, because
absolutely, and that's why like you're saying, one of the things that may come out of this at the back end of it is that there may need to be, and it's one of the things like the players with the drug policy changes wanted, was the establishment of different people outside of Roger Goodell. I know that's one of his things too. I mean, of course, he's had other issues with the commissioner as well, but having that outside arbitratorship or something like that may be a necessary, at least one of the minimum changes that comes out of this is, like you said, the way you have to reestablish a credible person to investigate and discipline cases, because like you said, you've kind of tainted the water as far as the commissioner's concerned.
Yeah, and that to me says he can't do his job. So, I think if the owners were thinking long-term instead of short-term, right now they're just trying to take the bullets and wait through the harsh waters and just, when everything clears up, just go on status quo. I think, and that might even be, you can argue, a good short-term strategy. The long-term, I don't think it can work, because, as I said, history has proven it might not be next week, it might not be a month from now, but at some point there's going to be a significant issue again that the commissioner's going to have to deal with, and it's all going to come back to that point. It's all going to come back and say, well, people are immediately going to say, how can Roger Goodell deal with this? He can't deal with anything.
You're listening to the Sports Fix. John McMullen from the Sports Network talking to J-Rock here as we're doing the NFL. One thing, as we kind of segue there, but still on the topic of Ray Rice, I did want to bring up something, because as we talked last week, and I'm sure you'll probably know where I'm going when I say with the outside the line story here, is you had mentioned how frequent what happened in the Ray Rice case legally is, if your name's all that outside the lines did the story where they looked into less than 1% of all people whose cases matched the same assault factors as Ray Rice get entered into. I think it was 70 out of 15,000 cases allowed to enter the PTI program for the first offenders there. So that definitely leans you towards the side of a very rare outcome. So, I did when I heard that, I said, man, John and I had just kind of talked about something like that last week.
Yeah, no, I kind of think that was a sensationalistic report, because I talked to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor, by the way, is on record and saying, basically, he doesn't understand the uproar, because, okay, as he explained it, this is best case scenario for people who think Ray Rice should be in jail as we speak today. If he went to trial and he was found guilty as a first-time offender, he would have gotten probation. There's absolutely no question about that. So when it comes to somebody with, there's no doubt that when you have the financial wherewithal of Ray Rice and you're able to hire the legal counsel that he's able to do, that plays into it. So if you're a prosecutor, you have to look at what's the end game. And the end game here was a felony conviction and probation. Now, some people might say that's better, and I certainly understand that, because if you have a felony on your record and this kind of thing happens again, then you're in play for much more difficult thing. They looked at it in a real-life situation, and that's what legal people do. For better or for not, they take the emotion out of it, and they try to do the jobs the best they can. And they saw the end game and what it was, and the fact that they had somebody who was willing to at least give lip service at the very least of getting help, and that's why they went in that direction.